Okay, we're gonna call the meeting to order at 2:03 special meeting. Primarily here to talk about
This would be the moment to announce which members from the select board are here.
okay.
It's shared too, guys. It's shared here.
Select board members in attendance, there's Charles Messick and
Francis Rose,
Rose.
Biondo,
Patty Gemelli.
Dan Fingus.
Stan Fingers. So let's see, I'm just reading through the notes here. Okay. Anything, we don't have any changes to the agenda, I don't believe. That I know of, anyone know of anything? Any announcements or anything people want to make sure we know about right at the moment?
Dan Fingus, I'll just say, so we've had a lot of select board meetings recently, a lot of special meetings, a lot of things going on. For anyone who wants something to be on the select board agenda, Carl and our administrative assistant, Kristen, will be the ones you contact with what you would like on the agenda, how much time you think you might need, and any supporting materials. We are getting a lot of requests for agenda items without supporting documentation, asks for sign-on letters without actual sign-on letters being shown to us. So if we could get that at least a week before meetings, it would help all of us be more informed with the decisions we're making. So you can email Carl and Kristen. Those numbers, those emails are on the website, and hopefully you can send us information as well, so that we're a little bit better informed with these very rapid post-flood decisions and other decisions that we're making.
Yeah, thank you. The reason we're here today is to primarily approve a natural resources conservation grant that needs a signature by tomorrow morning. And so that's primarily why we're here, and then we've added other things with Wes documentation. Any other, thank you, Dan, for that. Any other comments? Okay. Public comment. Anyone have public comment? We are going to get into some
Comments on what?
Anything, this is generic public comment.
Yeah.
We also have agenda items. If you want to make comments during specific agenda items, you can do that as well. So
Yeah, we wanted to talk about the Stephen Callahan, we wanted to talk about the property things, so.
Yeah.
Was that item number 7 on the?
number, yeah, the final item on the agenda.
final, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, we'll wait on that. So the first item is to allow the board chair to sign this is the request for the Natural Resources Conservation Service grant, and this has to be in tomorrow, that's why we're meeting today.
Is this a motion?
Do you have any hands here?
Can we, so this is for the Flood Control Act.
Yes,
We understand as sponsors of emergency watershed protection measures that our responsibilities will include contributing a share of the project cost as determined by NRCS by providing funds or eligible services necessary to undertake the activity, obtaining any necessary real property rights, water rights, and regulatory permits, and agreeing to provide for any required operation and maintenance of the completed emergency measures. And so this is just asking for federal funds to help with safeguarding lives and property from imminent hazards of future landslides, loss of property, and erosion of banks in the event of future rain events.
yes, and this is part of the mitigation, bigger mitigation grants that we're looking for, which are going to be us planning for the future to help prevent more damage.
Was there other discussion or question?
There was a hand up here.
Oh, no, that's
Okay.
So motion to allow Carl Bissex, board chair, to sign letter dated September 24th. To Travis Thomason of the Natural Resource Conservation Service on behalf of the board.
And I would second that.
And any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, well, I'll give.
That is a 4-0 vote.
Yeah, the motion
That's a
passes.
4-0 vote, that is correct. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
I'm signing on behalf of. I'll have to get that to Michael. Okay, so there is a discussed selection of the new select board.
Are these both the same thing?
Approved submission, that's the one.
What's one above it?
That's what we just did, so we have not.
Oh, we have not yet done this one.
Emergency
We don't have any paperwork on this one, sort of in line with what you were talking about. It's the submission of emergency watershed protection assistance request letter. I think what this means is that we have to send a letter to this agency that is looking for this to make sure that we are approving this activity.
So we're requesting again, this is federal money asking for emergency watershed protection assistance money.
Right.
For the watersheds in Plainfield, and who made this request?
I don't know who made this request. It wound up on the agenda. But
Yeah.
Karen may have done it, Karen Hatcher, name.
probably Karen, because it's all part of the.
Is she on?
And she's on vacation, so.
Yeah, she's traveling.
Maybe Charlie Cogbill has a suggestion or an idea.
Charlie?
Yeah, this grant, is co-sponsored by the town, but the money actually goes to individuals that are co-sponsored with the town. So, it's necessary for the town to act first. Karen Hatcher has kind of set this up very quickly and I assume properly, such that then individuals can, with the town, ask for individual mitigation from the NRCS. And I think there's two things, one of which we have to apply, which I assume is this letter. The deadline is the 30th. And as I say, the town has to sign on as the first step.
Wait,
Do we just do that?
We don't, thank you, Charlie. You don't have a letter in front of us.
I think that we might actually have this, it's twice, so. Karen has you sent us through Karen a letter, for the EWP, which is the Emergency Watershed Program.
Right.
And it's the letter we just signed.
Yes,
So I think that this is just that we put it on
agenda
the
twice.
it is a emergency watershed protection letter
Yes.
that we are sending to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's the way I read this. As far as I can tell, there isn't, I just looked through our emails, there isn't any other specific letters, but Karen did send us this letter.
Yeah, and that's what I printed out.
Okay, so it's the same thing that we just signed?
So we don't have this, I mean, I guess if it isn't right, we can check in with Karen
Yeah,
on Monday and see if there's something else we need to be doing.
okay, we're gonna let that table until we know for sure what's going on. We'll discuss selection of new select board member to fill open seat. You wanna take the lead on that, Ross?
I can, I guess looking for clarity about, is the desire for a vote today, or is this simply a report back on the interviews?
It'd be nice to select somebody, but I don't know how people feel about being in open or executive session.
I would want clarity if we can actually be in executive session for an appointment.
Okay.
It's not an HR related
let's-
thing, and so I think HR and legal matters are the only things that we can do in executive session.
Let's do it next meeting
Okay,
and make our decision.
can you speak to the process we've had thus far with
Sure,
interviews, et cetera?
there have been 3 interested candidates, not really candidates, it's not an election, it's an appointment process. David Peralt, Lydia Vitale, and Peter Youngberg, all of whom are qualified for the position. This has been interviews with Carl and myself in the last week. Kind of what is interest, what are hopes, is each one bringing to the table. They were all encouraging, all would be super qualified for the position. We can go in more deeply to like specifics, shall we? Is this the time, is this the place? Do you have a question?
Silly question, is there a limit to how many members you can have?
We are on 5.
Five.
We were supposed to have 5.
We're filling an empty seat because Jim Bolt stepped down.
Right, so this will be an appointment, not an election.
Because it's
Next
between
March,
election cycles.
it will be an election.
And yeah, the term is only as long as Jim's was to run out, which is this coming town meeting. So it's a 6-month appointment.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Just a process question, so I know that Carl and Dan are on the Plainfield Arts Board. I
yes,
know there was a possible action item that got tabled from the last meeting. If are Dan and Carl planning to vote on Plainfield Arts matters as select board members while also on that board? And if not, can just Rose and Patty, only 2 members of a 5-person board, pass something? from the
yeah. I think it would be inappropriate for us to vote on money relating to the.
I don't agree, but that's,
You know, okay.
no, I mean, conflict of interest policy is about personal like gain, and since we are volunteers on the Plainfield Arts Board, we don't monetarily, we have there's no benefit, it's a nonprofit, it'd be the same if someone was on the Cutler Library Board, like there's a lot of boards in town, and so my reading of conflict of interest policy is that since it will not benefit me personally, there's not actually a conflict. But it's for a nonprofit, so I would be comfortable voting on it as long as it's completely transparent. It's a contract renewal for the exact same amounts in contract that were done last year by a different select board, so it's not something that I would.
We can state that before, if we want to think
Oh,
about.
I would be very, I'm the president of the Plainfield Arts Board, that's an easy to find fact, and I'm happy to state that before votes, but giving the same amount of money as last year to Plainfield Arts does not benefit me personally in any specific way.
Well, I'm just thinking there's the discussion about the shed that might be used as like a pet for storage for emergency situations. So when that comes up, is it Dan, the select board member, who's voting on that, or is it Dan, president of Plainfield Arts, who's voting?
It would be me, the select board member. Yeah, I'm here in this role to figure out what's right for the town. And when I'm in the Plainfield Arts role, I'm trying to figure out how we can bring arts and culture to the community. I don't think there's like a huge disagreement. If for some reason it seemed like there was actually like disagreement in that, then I'd be happy to not vote. But I think in the normal running of that nonprofit, I don't think there's any problem. And again, it's not, I don't take any funding of any kind from that nonprofit.
Just something I'm not agreeing.
Yeah,
And he could decide that he doesn't want to, we can have a different, there's not, and if others on the board have a problem with me voting, we can also have that discussion. And I'm sure there's established law on how that works, and we can look into it, but.
yeah, I'll look at the league, I'll talk to the league and see what they're thinking.
And we will have 3 outside
Right.
of you all soon.
Yeah,
Would you state your name for the
Oh,
record?
it's Eric Layfield, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, we should be asking people to speak their name. All right, anything else on that? Okay, so apparently everybody's here because there was a letter seeking funding assistance from the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission to explore whether it's appropriate to seek formal designation of a new neighborhood development area through Agency of Commerce and Community Development on the 23 acres of private land east of Main Street South and south of East Hill. I don't know if we have a letter for this. So I'm not sure how we can agree to do that, but we can have a discussion.
I think Michael Zonner was proposing that he would write something up with once the select board, if the select board could give it a green light, that's how I understood it. Perhaps with Will Colgan,
So he was supposed to have a letter to us.
yeah, and do you?
I think it sounds like he was asking the select board if we wanted to go for this funding, then we would say yes, and then he would write a letter. Because I think
That's how I understand
the process.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that would need to be signed necessarily by you, I think, Michael Donner has submitted other grants on behalf of the town.
Right,
Once
right.
given permission to do so.
Okay,
Yeah.
as,
State your name for the record.
Sorry, my name is Jermaine Zumri, and I can give even a little more background on this.
yeah, I guess I would like that, because
Yeah.
there's people here who probably.
Sure, I think maybe some folks saw the last Tuesday on the 24th. Well, there's front porch forum. The meeting, there was a meeting last Tuesday, presentation last Tuesday. I think there will be a recording that, if it hasn't been circulated already. The premise of at least the presentation that I gave at that meeting was talking about, hey, we're losing a lot of houses in the village and along the Brook Road. Many of them are gone already. Some of them will probably go in the near future. And how do we maintain our vitality as a village while also giving our space? If we're gonna have a village, we need a place to have it. We've discovered that we have a lot more floodplain than we used to think that we have. And so building on higher ground is kind of a logical place to do that. We happen to have some higher ground that is immediately adjacent to the village, making it a logical place to do that. That is sort of the beginning of the process. If that were to move forward, the town would be buying it and subdividing the land, and there is already a public survey that is circulating that probably some of you, if not many of you, have seen. But in order to actually do that, it's not just a town decision, there has to be a lot of state permission and planning permission in order to do that. And so one of those ways that's commonly done is Act 250, but that's much more of a thing for private developers. And there were some recent exemptions that were given to Act 250, however, we applied for that and we're told that the Natural Resource Board is in a holding process because there are lack of legislative clarity around those exemptions. And that whole process could take 6 to 12 months or maybe longer. Is essentially and that's Michael Zonner, who used to work for Act 250, reached out to Natural Resource board chair, and so these are pretty authoritative, said we don't have enough the legislation is unclear in a variety of specific ways there, and we were told by the regional coordinator that I submitted the information to that we're on hold. It's not that we're not exempt, we just don't know whether we are, and nobody can do anything. So we're trying to find alternative avenues to try to move some of this forward, because we also are in a situation where we need to do something. You know, we have this sort of like, there are people in the village who need to move their houses, who may want to move them up there, that have perfectly good homes if they can be moved. There are other people who have already been displaced and would be interested in moving, and even if that process takes 2 years, it's better than that taking 5 to 10 years or something like that. So as we examine all the avenues of this, one avenue, a viable avenue that's emerged, and this has been in conversation, particularly led by Will Colgan, who's not able to be here today, who's the planning commission chair, talking with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. This designation of creating a new neighborhood designation immediately adjacent to a village or an existing village is kind of the purpose of this designation that then would allow us to build a new neighborhood. The specifics of the exact layout of that neighborhood and the exact density, that would be subject then to the town rules, but the ability to have the number of subdivided parcels of land that is basically would be needed to do this. The proposal currently is to do 30 in one portion of the area. That's the project parameters. We need to have some sort of larger level of state green light in order to even contemplate that. And
So if I'm understanding, then this is attempting to get that green light, or at least start the process.
So what this is applying to the center, this is so Will Colgan calls it the planning industrial complex. Because it's just like, so this is applying to the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, who has grant funds to help us put an application together that we would then apply for this neighborhood designation.
Gotcha.
So it's like, it is kind of layered there, in this crazy way.
And the idea is that funds are grant funds to do this.
Exactly, the ones that are available now, and they're available first come, first serve, which means if we get our application, if we apply, we get it as long as we get there fast enough, and that's why there's a certain amount of urgency.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
State your name for the record, please.
Stephen Callahan, again. So this funding, would it be kind of like for a consultant?
So
The
this,
consultant to look at the whole situation and
so the funding,
decide whether this is a good candidate for an application?
I think, how I understand it is that this would be essentially Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, which is a regional, which kind of the town pays into it. And it helps serve our whole region for various cleaning needs, because like many small towns, almost all of our staff and committee chairs are volunteers. Who may not have the levels of professional expertise that are needed in certain circumstances. Planning is one of them, it's a very complicated area. So these regional planning commissions have full-time planners and expert staff that help smaller towns develop things like this. So this is saying they have a larger grant. And this is just saying that if we got these money, it would be $5,000 of their staff person's time to help look at and then develop an application. So the first preliminary phase would be them confirming that is it even a good fit? And then if it is a good fit for us, and I want to emphasize that there are many steps to this process. Getting a green light to even be able to do anything up there at the state level is important before we could even plan. So there is per the presentation that I gave last Tuesday, there's a steering committee currently of 14 people, but we would more than welcome additional members if there were other people that were interested. And the specifics of how the final plotting of the land and where the roads go and those sort of things, that decision will happen as a community-wide process. The steering committee is the one that is basically trying to develop that proposal as a community group that then will bring that to the select board once we have that fleshed out. And that will be drawn from not only just like the public survey that's available now, but also multiple community meetings where we will be looking and workshopping potential designs. It is also really important to emphasize the part that we can do as a town is the layout of that land. It is not the building of buildings and structures, because the building of buildings and structures would be very, very expensive. We just don't have the resources to realistically undertake that. But to put the plots that people could build on and set the parameters and permitting and zoning for that would foster a certain level of aesthetic and density is definitely something that we can do. Clear as mud?
Yeah, let people process that for a second. Did you have something?
I was just gonna say, I know we have a number of neighbors and folks that live in that area that are in the room and maybe on the Zoom, would love thoughts, feedback, and I know some of you came to speak, so.
Well, let's start some more questions, Stephen Callahan again. I read over this morning, I read over what is the
Neighborhood
NDA,
development.
the NDAs, it's a very long set, they have a lot of requirements, 12 pages of requirements until they're satisfied. But one thing I was very confused about was, I don't know if anyone here knows anything about this, this Act 250, does it apply to the land or not? And who decides whether, maybe George knows something about this, whether this Act 250 is currently in effect?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wrote to the select Janice Grill this morning about this, because I understand that this designation would benefit the town and the development in many ways and get us up for grants and all these good things. However, what concerned me about it was that it seemed to do, one of the things that it did was it would eliminate Act 250, and it would also eliminate other appeals to the environmental board about this development. And I mean, I think George and Rose can speak to concerns we have about the wetland in the area. But so it just seems dangerous to take away those things that were put in place to protect the environment, protect not only the environment, but one of the things that it specifically said was that you couldn't appeal about the development not being in character with the neighborhood. So these are things that normally are taken into consideration, but would then, once this designation were in place, would not have to be. And I'm not saying that the select board and the steering committee would not, just out of good faith, take those into consideration, but I'm concerned about allowing that, changing the law, changing zoning, especially if, you know, somehow this particular group abandoned the project and then this new zoning were in place, it could also have problems.
Good point.
Much someone else.
So, in my day job, I work for Vermont Natural Resources Council, so, the land use folks that, lawyers and others that work at Vermont Natural Resource Council was part of the writing of the new Act 250 bill that happened this last year. What it did, I mean, it both created a lot more, conservation things and also opened up some areas around villages and cities and towns to allow for development, so it did a little bit of both things. There are already parts of the state that don't go through Act 250 if they're an established with water and sewer. And all this did was slightly expand some of the area. My understanding, and the maps aren't done, the law passed in June, it became quote unquote effective July 1st, but there are lots of laws and like lots of rules around it that have to get rewritten, and they're in the process of rewriting those, and that's why there's this kind of slowdown to say like, we have to rewrite the rules before we can tell you what the rules are. But the interim Act 250 exemptions map, there's an interactive map, you can find it on the Vermont League of Cities and Towns website, or through the state website, shows where there are now slightly wider areas that are going to be allowed to not go through Act 250, still have to go through development review by Plainfield. The reason they don't go through Act 250 is because they go through a town's development review, and because they're already on water and sewer, and they meet other criteria. And so those maps, if you look at them, this area so close to the village is on that area that would not have Act 250. Yeah, it meets, if you look, and again, these are not finalized maps, they're interim maps, but you can look at them and see that that these fit into it. So we are expecting, like that whole plot, I'm looking at it right now, that whole plot we're talking about fits into it, but then pretty quickly the neighboring plots are not in that new area. And for example, the town garage is not in that area, because it's just totally too far out. But it's based on current infrastructure and current, since we have zoning laws as a village. And so that's what the new state law says, is if you have zoning laws and you have water and wastewater, it's a bigger area that allows the town to make these decisions. And there's still other laws, so like thinking about what I'm trying to think of what's the word I'm thinking of, where the water is, like the area you're worried about. There are still protections for those kinds of lands, whether you're in Act 250 or not.
We'll have to do a wetland.
Yeah,
survey,
wetlands, that's the word.
no matter what.
We're gonna have to do, there's gonna have to be a wetland survey, there's going to have to be an environmental review, all of those things still happen without Act 250. Act 250 was a specific land use law that looks at part of it. There are still environmental conservation laws in the state that would still be effective.
Maybe you would know this, Dan, but
State your name for the record.
sorry, Rose Paul. And some of us have read that neighborhood development thing, NDA, very recently. And it's not clear to me whether town planning, zoning, regulations apply once you have an NDA designation. So I couldn't tell that for myself. There was also there's a whole guidance doc, but then there's a little brochure kind of doc. In the brochure doc, it just has bullets, but it's like one of the bullets is like has some phrase about does not need state review, and you know, you don't know what they're talking about, what they're referring to. It seems like, okay, maybe we don't need Act 250, but you didn't know about wetlands, you didn't know about stormwater, you didn't know about wildlife habitat, so it was vague.
So my understanding, we should look at all of this, and we're gonna have community meetings, we're gonna have a lot of different things. What would happen with an NDA is that the whole area would get one kind of zoning, we would create rules as a town for that, and it would just apply to the whole area. There would still be zoning requirements, there would still be, like, we could say we don't want 3-story buildings, or we could say we do want 3-story buildings, like all those things can still happen. It's just it becomes one zone together. I mean, at least, and we can look into it, but that's my understanding.
I feel I read vagueness there, like there's this further thing, you know, if you want an NDA, I think you can choose to, or you have to agree to complete streets, and then complete streets has a whole other set of requirements. So you burrow in and in and in, and None of it's
We're gonna
clear
learn-
yet.
We're gonna learn a lot.
Yeah, I think we can definitely have
And just to
Regional
point
planning
out,
commission.
sorry.
Okay, Janice, again, I'm sorry, but it also did say that one of the requirements, or at least desires of the NDA was that there would be mixed use, which would include buildings 3 stories or more. In some part of the area.
It could or
It had, no, it had to,
It needed to.
it needed to have both apartments, 3-story or more, didn't have to be for regular smaller things, townhouses, a mix, and also businesses.
It seems like that should be the top control, but I don't know.
I
What do you
think one of the things that I think is important to clarify for today is that as I understand it, the motion or the proposal today was to apply just for the funds to look at whether this would be a good decision. This
Yes.
is not to say that we would
Right.
submit the application. I think we would want more information. I think we'd want somebody from Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission who would probably have worked on our specific project and would come and have much more definitive answers to these questions. I think they're good questions. I don't know the definitive answers, but I think to get those, step one would be engage, applying for the funds that are there on a first come, first served basis, and then they would really look into our specifics, and then they could hopefully have some solid answers that they could bring to this.
Yeah,
So, well, actually, step one is whether we want to apply, and whether we want to do, that's-
You mean whether we want to request funds
Whether we
to
request
look
funds.
into it?
Yeah, because that, there could be a decision of no, well, we don't, that looks kind of scary to give up the protection of 250 or.
Well, we would have to apply to
We
get,
don't know enough, maybe we should look into this more, find out what 250 is covering, what it's not covering.
I think, doesn't it sound like the consultant would give us some guidance on that question?
So,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, George.
Hi, George Springston. I just want to back out a little bit and just make sure that as we get into this process, and the NDA is new for everyone, it's brand new for the RPC. They may have helped put it together, but this didn't exist last year. It is like a new type of planning. Just remember that right now, we're in the field that we're talking about, those fields, and our houses are in a rural residential zoning. And the village is, in that denser, very different zoning.
That field's actually in the village designated zoning already.
And, okay, oh, well, I missed that.
It's changed.
Since 2011, it's been in that zone.
I missed that, okay. However, I'll make a related point that this is that transition zone. And yes, there's a hard line on the map between the two zones, but it's important that we really look at how we build this out. And I want to make sure that we do good planning for this, that we find a way to do a good project. Yeah, that's great. But part of that means starting far enough back where you look at what the land is capable for and appropriate for. And then you figure out how many houses you want on it. Because it's not clear to me how many housing units are appropriate for that land. I have some ideas about where they should be, but we need to work that through in detail. And as we go into the NDA process, it does seem like the town, both the town individuals, but also the town itself, needs to consider whether we lose something by taking the NDA route. Because if Act 250 did apply to this, there are times when towns want to make comments based on some of the 10 Act 250 criteria. And they may even want to disagree with decisions of the Act 250 district environmental folks. And if the town loses that, or if the individuals around lose that, that we want to go into that eyes wide open.
Yeah, and it's not clear that we would necessarily lose that influence, but we just don't know, right?
Well,
Right.
one part, it's hard to read You have to make sure, there's an annual report on the NDAs, that's the brochure Rose mentioned. And then there's the guidance document for a bond, with multiple pages, and that's what all the meat of it so far is. And when you read that, there is a section, as Janice pointed out, where it's the checklist for things you have to deal with to get an NDA, is you've got to have mixed use residential scattered throughout, it said throughout, you can't have like apartments over here and houses there, that seemed odd to me. That it has to be throughout, and that
Including
Bill-
commercial.
and that I thought there was a mention of commercial, but I couldn't find where it was when I looked again, so. And then there was a separate item that said that buildings had to be allowed to be 3 or more stories in height. In order to encourage dense housing. And there was a separate item which seemed a little in conflict that said you had to have at least 1/4 acre lots, if not smaller. If the adjacent area, by which I think they meant the village, had greater density, then you had to have that. So it's a little hard to tell, did it really require multi-unit housing or just dense individual unit housing? And so it's just all those sort of things. We're going to be asking the consultant a lot of questions to clarify it. I just wanted to make sure the select board was going in completely wide open on this.
Yeah. What do you know about any of that?
I know that, I mean, I have the zoning map, which I could maybe log in and put on the screen or something, but
You mean the interim Act 250?
No, not that one, just the Plainfield zoning act, so the current zoning regulations in place, because Will and I have been over this Will Colgan and I have been over this quite a bit. Is that the zoning regulations for the, what's it called, the village district, which includes both residential and commercial and all the stuff in the village, goes all the way across, it basically goes all the way out from the middle of the village, and it goes, I'm gonna try to zoom in on here and then pull this up, and I know this is probably harder to do it, but so you have the village, like the square of the village with the rectangle with Hudson Road going down, and the district goes all the way out to Cameron Road here, and it comes all the way out to East Hill over here, so and even goes across East Hill into the Marshfield line. So and that's that light yellow area, and this is, and the new proposed guidance keeps this same district as the village district, so since 2011 this zoning has been in place.
Okay.
And that now that zoning allows for it's 2 acre lots if you're not on municipal water and sewer, and it's 1/4 acre if you're on municipal. I think it's 1/4 acre currently if you're on municipal water sewer, and I think the new zoning proposes as small as 1/8 of an acre on municipal water and sewer. So so all of the, so in terms of the Plainfield zoning regulations, could you have residential, could you have commercial that are in place right there? So that is currently in place. Does that mean that it's somebody's gonna go and put up an apartment building there tomorrow? No, that's not what that means. But it does, you know, could somebody put a store in that area? They could, but we also know that the co-op struggled in its current location, even much closer down the village, so I don't know if that would be a good business strategy. So, you know, there's a lot of things, but I would say, I think very much the intention of the steering committee when looking at this is to say, you know, it's really hard to be all things to all people, and I'm sure everybody in this room recognizes that, but how can we get a good design as possible up here with as much input as possible that strikes some of these balances to make it. And I would say from folks, particularly on the East Hill side, the most logical thing to do is to try to put that to the furthest west portion of this property as possible, because that makes it closer to the village, which is where everybody wants to be anyway.
Yes, Steve?
In reading the NDA, this one, there are a lot of references to the bylaws of the town, of Plainfield, the municipality. Apparently, a lot of these requirements can't be met unless the bylaws of the town are already allowing for it, if they already allow for a quarter acre or whatever, or, so I don't know where, I guess I should be looking up where our bylaws are to try to get clarity about all these different complexities.
I assume those are accessible on our website. I have not looked at them.
If you go to the town website and you go to the zoning commission, you'll have all, that's where that map, that's where I got that map from and all the associated documents.
I must have looked at an old map.
Question to the chat, do you know, Arian, is the land prime agricultural land?
It is not considered statewide something, I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's statewide prime.
Okay,
It's prime ag land on the A&R Atlas.
okay,
But there are different primes, but it's prime ag land statewide.
okay, I got, you probably have, well, I don't understand the nuance there, maybe you could explain it.
I don't know the differentiation in it, but such land is typically that in Act 250, they're trying to get you to reduce impacts on prime ag lands of whatever category, but we have to check with the regional planning commission as to exactly what it means.
Yeah.
You'll also find, this is George again, you'll also find that part of that area is in the source protection area for the Hood Wells, the northern part of it. That doesn't mean that you can't see development there, but it's one of those additional things to be cautious about.
What are the Hood Wells?
Okay, there is a backup water supply for the town of Plainfield, water system. The main source of our water comes from springs that are up Maple Hill, but there is a backup in times of low flow down below the rail bed, just beyond the cemetery, at a site called the Hood Wells. They used to supply the H.P. Hood Creamery that was up on the rail bed. And since the 1950s or 60s, something like that, the town is owned. So the source protection area for that extends up gradient. The water flows from the area in question towards there.
Yeah, Rose.
I have a couple of comments. One is, could, citizens of the town see the application when it's prepared before it's submitted? I would really like to be able to see it, because I do have some natural resources knowledge from my past. But then the other is more of a question. I think I've heard Arian say the town will buy the land, and has the select board agreed to that?
We haven't agreed to anything yet. This is all planned,
It's a proposal.
yeah.
And again, there's no application being submitted right now, right?
I know.
So I mean, and I think we as a select board, and I think also the steering committee wants to have public input processes in public meetings, which would include all of you, hopefully, before we put in anything. And so this is just asking for $5,000 to give us a staff person to help us look into this.
Yeah.
Not to say yes or no, not to definitely put in
And
that application or a different kind, but really just to bring some regional planning expertise, resources to the town.
And not even necessarily with that $5,000 to come up with a plan of how we're gonna go forward. I think what we wanna find out is how do we go about getting the plan to go forward. That's the way I see it.
So if I may comment again, this is Rose Paul. So a statement that the town will buy the land is a premature statement.
Yes,
Well, the town has never said they would buy them.
yeah. And given our cash situation, it's gonna have to be done, if it's done, it's gonna have to be done very delicately.
Okay.
I had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Stephen John?
Yeah.
Has there been any price established on the land from the property owners?
No, we haven't even gotten that far. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that,
Janice.
like Janice Grill, sorry, my understanding is that the feasibility of the plan would require not only the town buying it, but the town paying for the infrastructure, the water, the sewage, the electricity and so on, which is, you know, I think people need to know
Well,
Absolutely.
quite a
well,
lot.
I would say we don't know what the feasibility of the plan is, because there's been no plan written yet. So we can't know the feasibility of a plan that's not written.
Right.
There is cost to water and wastewater that would have to happen from somebody. Either from the town or from some developer, affordable housing developer, or from housing, like there's lots of ways things can get paid for. I don't think that there's any specific number. That like, if we wanna do this, the town has to pay X, we definitely don't have that. So, what's that?
Looks like Christie has a question.
Is that, no, that's.
Oh, no, it's-
I don't think so.
Oh.
Oh, that's
No,
that's the cursor on
Oh.
that. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, I don't think we could, I think like. The land would have a cost, water, wastewater, there's making the roads, all of these things would have costs. Who will bear those costs? And if we even decide, you know, if the town decides to move, other people decide to move, it's all, none of that's been planned yet. So I think that should be the message, is like, this is all exploratory. No plan has been created, there's no decisions that have been made. There's no money being spent unless we get $5,000 to have somebody help us look into it.
Well, this is Rose again. I'll just say for the record, I am not opposed to the town signing this letter. I think it's a good idea, myself personally.
I did have a question, it's been brought up a couple times tonight, Marion, this is Carl, what's this about 3 stories, did I hear somebody say that it was a minimum of 3 stories?
I don't, I mean,
Or do we know?
I can't speak to that
Okay.
specifically, and I'm sorry, I think, I do know that Michael Zonner and Will Colgan who are not able to be here today, have maybe been through this a little bit more, but I think also this was basically when we had Mike and Will and others, and there's been a series of conversations with the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission about how to sort of, hey, this Act 250 seemed like it was gonna work with these state legislative ventions, and even like Agency of Commerce and Community Development said, oh yeah, they showed us this map that Dan referenced, and they're like, you guys are clearly in the map. This is gonna be an easy fit to go through with this. And then the Natural Resource Board came back and said, oh, the interim regulations, we need all this clarification, and it just sounded like it was gonna be a long time. We should look at other options. And this was another option that emerged. So I apologize for not having all of the ins and outs of that. I mean, the one thing I would say is that there are 3-story buildings in the village presently.
Yeah.
I have a clarification, I'm not against 3-story, I wasn't saying, oh God, it's just that I think what it's, the regulations say more specifically, I think that the committee that approves the designation wants, you know, in some cases, 4 out of 5 of these things, or, you know, 5 out of 10 or something. So it's not that we need to meet every single one, but this was one of them. I don't know how highly that is weighted.
Okay. And this is George Springston, if I could, yeah, it's my reading of a complicated document, the guidance document on filling out the applications, and it's new to all of us. I have never heard of this until yesterday. So we're all puzzling.
Well, when we're in something new like this, it strikes me that there becomes huge numbers of questions, huge concerns. How's it gonna impact me? I mean, I think they're all valid things. So I'd like to find out is what, you know, understanding that things sometimes have to happen quickly. So we can't have a town meeting every time there's some event that comes up or a decision to be made. But it's our intention to have a lot of public input on this. And just like the last meeting we had Tuesday, we waited until we had what we felt was some information to share, as opposed to just having a meeting every week or something. So I think we approach it, is that a fair statement?
I 100% agree, and I think, you know, my understanding is that we ask for this $5,000. They do a bunch of review, and they first say like, well, does this even seem like it's a reasonable fit? You know, and once they get into some of those detailed criteria, and then they don't just go ahead and file something. We would need to come back to the select board to say, actually, hey, we looked into this. It seems like we would be a good fit, and then let's have that select board meeting ask these questions, hopefully with somebody from Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission who could very specifically answer some of these things, because I feel flat-footed in terms of being able to respond to those specific questions, and I think they're really good questions, and I think all that this does is just open it, it gives us a trained person who can look into this and better respond to these things. Does not obligate us to even pursue this.
Yep.
So you're really suggesting that we do this and this will help you with your work?
I think so. I mean, I think it's $5,000 of free money to have a professional look at this and then come back and bring us information that I think that would definitely make it to a select board meeting. You know, they could come back and say, this is a good fit for reason X, Y, and Z. In which case it just kind of dies right there. But if they say, this is a good fit for reasons X, Y, and Z, and it's consistent with some of these other conversations, I would see that coming back to the select board at that time, making sure that you all are in the loop that can also, and whether virtually or in person, come and ask these same questions and make sure that we get some definitive answers so that we're all on the same page. Because I hear a lot of uncertainty in the room, and uncertainty is not a great thing, and I don't know the answer to those questions. I think they're good questions. And so this just allows us to get definitive answers without obligating us to do anything.
Fair to say, I'd say.
Well, with that said, I would love for us to make a motion to ask Michael Zonner to write a letter to the Regional Planning Commission to explore or to ask for funding assistance for this NDA process.
I would second that.
Is there a second on that?
I would second that.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All 4 ayes, and we will ask him to do that. Do you want to take that on to ask?
I can follow up with my,
Yeah.
I know he wasn't feeling well this morning.
Yeah.
Today, so we didn't make it. Yeah, but I'll send you.
Okay, I think that's the last item on our agenda. We have a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn at 2:55 p.m.
at 2:55 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
say
Aye. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming in. Hopefully we'll have more information.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.